The camera lingers on a darkened studio, the silence broken only by the faint hum of neon lights. Jeffree Star sits alone, eyes hollow yet sharp, the weight of public scrutiny etched into every line of his face. Behind the glam and glitter, a world of secrets has festered, alliances fractured, reputations tarnished, friendships weaponized. For years, whispers circulated, accusations dismissed or hidden beneath layers of curated perfection. Tonight, the silence fractures. The question hangs like a storm cloud. What truths have been buried in plain sight? And who will survive the fallout once they emerge? Every revelation promises not just scandal, but a window into the psyche of a man whose brilliance has always danced dangerously close to self-destruction. As the frame tightens on his trembling hands, the audience feels the tension, the guilt, and the isolation. Somewhere between confession and confession withheld, the line between victim and perpetrator blurs, leaving only one certainty: nothing will ever be the same again. The camera drifts slowly through a dimly lit corridor, the walls adorned with fading posters of past performances and early makeup looks. Each frame catches a fragment of history, a relic of ambition pressed against the relentless tick of time. Jeffree Star's childhood was a landscape of contrasts, bright bursts of creativity confined within narrow walls of judgment and indifference. His home, while ordinary to some, was a stage of survival. Each glance, each word, was scrutinized. Every achievement had to be amplified, every misstep concealed, because to falter was to invite cruelty. In those early years, a young Jeffree learned the weight of attention, both coveted and feared. He discovered that the world applauded spectacle but remained blind to the quiet ache beneath the surface. In the dim light of an abandoned studio, the camera lingers on empty palettes and glittering brushes, objects that once shaped his power and persona. They are silent witnesses to a life built on the delicate tension between brilliance and rejection. Jeffree's artistic genius emerged early, a fearless experimentation with color, form, and persona, but the world outside rarely recognized the nuance. Bullies at school, whispers of judgment online, and the subtle cruelty of adults reinforced a profound sense of alienation. Each insult became a wound, each slight a layer of armor he would carry into adulthood. As his notoriety grew on early social media platforms, so did the complexity of his internal world, pride interlaced with self-doubt, confidence coexisting with a gnawing fear of exposure. By the time he began to craft his first viral videos, Jeffree's public image had become a carefully curated construct. The glitter, the confidence, the unapologetic audacity, all shields against a past that refused to fade. Yet, even as fans cheered and followers multiplied, the camera catches moments he never intended to reveal: a pause in front of a mirror, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes, a hand trembling over a highlighter palette. Each product launch, each dramatic post, is both a triumph and a question: who is performing, and who is being performed upon? The tension builds as the narrative threads toward the first major controversy. The world sees an icon, a fearless entrepreneur, but the camera reveals the unseen: the scars of childhood, the betrayals that shaped his resilience, the isolation that lurks behind the fame. Every glittered victory carries the shadow of doubt, and as the frame tightens on his solitary figure in an empty dressing room, the viewer senses a storm on the horizon. The empire he has built is dazzling, yet fragile, an intricate web poised to tremble under the weight of revelation. And then, just as the lights dim and the silence thickens, a question lingers in the air, heavy and unspoken. How much of Jeffree Star is real, and how much is the mask the world has come to worship? The first tremors of the controversy that will shake everything are felt, not yet seen, but deeply sensed, like a shadow stretching across a glittered kingdom. Fame arrived like a tidal wave, immediate, brilliant, and merciless. Jeffree Star stood at the center, glittering under spotlights, the world applauding his audacity, yet no one truly seeing the solitude that lay beneath. The same platforms that elevated him into stardom became instruments of isolation, their algorithms magnifying every mistake, every whispered doubt. Friends, once steady pillars, became fleeting, transactional, Alliances were forged and broken as quickly as social media trends, leaving a trail of empty conversations and unanswered calls. Behind the glamour, the silence was deafening. The studio, a cathedral of glitter, neon, and manicured perfection, offered light but no warmth. Cameras captured the brilliance of product launches, the chemistry of collaborations, the performative confidence, yet never the pause, the quiet, the moments when Jeffree's gaze faltered in the mirror. He questioned loyalty, trust, and the morality of every decision, haunted by the knowledge that each word, each post, could ignite storms. Even the laughter of colleagues seemed fragile, often tinged with calculation. The pressures of fame compounded past wounds, childhood rejection, whispered insults, the subtle cruelties that shaped his perception of the world. Perfection became both armor and prison. As his empire glittered with success, Jeffree confronted the invisible weight of expectation. Social media chatter became a constant echo in empty rooms. Every comment was a judgment, every viral video a litmus test of public favor. Relationships fractured under the burden of ambition, the cost of influence measured in trust eroded and intimacy denied. He felt guilt for moments of harshness, remorse for missteps amplified into global conversations, and a creeping self-doubt that was both a shadow and a companion. The tension escalates as whispers of past controversies, buried but never gone, creep back into view. The empire, polished and dazzling, was vulnerable beneath its surface. Behind closed doors, Jeffree wrestled with fear, isolation, and the moral ambiguity of his choices. The world saw the spectacle. He felt the solitude. The camera lingers on him alone, walking down a corridor lined with glittering awards and empty frames, the faint hum of distant traffic punctuating the silence. And then, on the horizon, a revelation emerges, not yet spoken, but imminent. A hidden truth, intimate and explosive, waits to disrupt the delicate balance he has fought to maintain. The question is unavoidable. Can the man who built a glittering empire survive the storm of exposure? Or will the very brilliance he cultivated become the mirror that shatters him? At the summit of his career, Jeffree Star appeared invincible. The world watched as multi-million-dollar launches sold out within minutes, as grandiose events illuminated the night with neon spectacle, and as his face, meticulously contoured and illuminated, became a symbol of aspiration and audacity. Fans adored him for his fearlessness. Critics dissected every statement, yet few glimpsed the private tension threading through the glittering triumphs. Fame, once a distant dream, had arrived as both crown and burden, its weight pressing on every decision, every interaction. Even in rooms filled with celebration, the echo of applause, the flash of cameras, the vibrancy of 1,000 products meticulously displayed, there was an undercurrent of isolation. Friends, once allies, had shifted into critics. Collaborators turned to observers, their smiles fragile, measured. Loyalty had become a currency more precarious than the glittered palettes lining the shelves. Every tweet, every public statement, was a performance under the scrutiny of millions, each word a potential spark for praise or condemnation. Behind the confidence, Jeffree wrestled with a persistent unease. The exposure magnified old wounds, insecurities from childhood and adolescence, and the unrelenting pressure to remain flawless, fearless, untouchable. His artistry had evolved into a complex armor, each brushstroke a statement, each palette a confession. Makeup was no longer merely aesthetic. It was projection, an extension of identity, a way to control narrative, to assert dominance in a world that had often questioned his worth. And yet, the apex of glory is rarely sanctuary. Within the dizzying heights, shadows gathered. Privilege, influence, and the toxic cycles of power forced reflection, reminding him that every empire carries its vulnerabilities, and that admiration can pivot to resentment in a heartbeat. Then, almost imperceptibly at first, the tension shifts. A scandal, a hidden truth, intimate and unavoidable, emerges, threatening to unravel the meticulously curated world he has built. The very platforms that elevated him now amplify whispers into roars, turning private missteps into global spectacle. Studio lights that once highlighted triumph now cast long, unflattering shadows. The camera lingers on quiet moments, a hand hesitating over a palette, a fleeting glance toward a room once filled with celebration, now eerily empty. The artistry, the armor, the confidence, everything seems fragile under the sudden weight of exposure. The apex, once a throne of certainty, becomes a precipice. Glory and peril coexist in a delicate balance, and the audience feels the tension as Jeffree confronts the stark realization that success can never fully protect from human vulnerability. One misstep, one revelation, could tip the empire he built into chaos. The chapter closes on this unsteady equilibrium. The glittered world shines brilliantly, but underneath, a storm brews, threatening to expose the man behind the mask. The world had waited for the moment that few dared to imagine, and now it had arrived. The controversy that had lingered like a shadow beneath Jeffree Star's glittered empire erupted with sudden, brutal intensity. Social media became a wildfire, the embers of past actions igniting into a storm of public scrutiny. Every comment, every post, every video dissected the man who had built his persona on audacity. Allies distanced themselves quietly, the fragile threads of loyalty snapping under pressure, while critics sharpened their words into weapons, eager to expose flaws long hidden. Jeffree felt the paradox of his existence like a physical weight pressing into his chest. Adored for fearlessness, vilified for humanity, he stood at the center of a storm that mirrored the inner conflict he had carried for decades. Psychological strain escalated. The solitude that once offered reflection now amplified anxiety. Every mirror became a judge, every notification a tribunal, every glance a reminder of vulnerability. The glitter that had defined his public self seemed suddenly insufficient, unable to shield the raw pain simmering beneath, a pain born from betrayal by friends, misunderstanding by fans, and the gnawing realization that ambition had a price. In the privacy of dimly lit rooms, Jeffree confronted the delicate architecture of his empire. The studios, the neon, the meticulously curated beauty products, once symbols of triumph, now reflected fragility. Each award, each sold-out launch, carried the echo of isolation, the weight of relationships strained under fame's relentless glare. Scenes shift, a phone left unanswered, a text drafted and never sent, the camera following his solitary footsteps through hallways once filled with laughter and celebration. Even the applause of the public, distant and echoing, feels hollow. Yet amid the collapse, a revelation emerges, a hidden ally, a secret reconciliation, a fragment of truth that reframes the narrative entirely. It does not erase the turmoil, but it introduces a glimmer of possibility, a fissure through which hope might leak. Jeffree stares into the mirror of his choices, seeing not only the empire and its fractures but the man who built it, flawed and human. The audience is left suspended on the precipice of uncertainty. What is salvageable, and what has been lost irreparably? The chapter closes on this tense reflection, the glittered surface of his world still dazzling, but the cracks undeniable. Shadows stretch long across rooms once radiant with confidence, reminding both Jeffree and the viewer that even brilliance cannot fully mask vulnerability, and that every empire carries the seeds of its own reckoning. From the ashes of chaos, a fragile clarity begins to emerge. The storm that had threatened to annihilate Jeffree Star's carefully constructed world leaves behind a silence heavy with reflection. In dimly lit studios, the glittered palettes now cast long shadows, their brilliance subdued by the weight of introspection. He moves through these spaces with deliberate caution, each step echoing not only through empty corridors, but also within the quiet chambers of his own conscience. The public persona and private self, once seemingly inseparable, begin to disentangle, revealing the man beneath the spectacle. The controversy that once threatened to dismantle his empire becomes a crucible, forcing a reckoning with the choices, relationships, and behaviors that shaped his life. Jeffree confronts mistakes that once could have been dismissed or hidden, harsh words spoken in haste, alliances betrayed, moments where ambition eclipsed empathy. Letters remain unsent, conversations replayed in memory, apologies rehearsed in silence. Yet this is not surrender. It is a deliberate negotiation with truth, a careful navigation between accountability and self-preservation. The camera lingers on intimate moments, the glint of a tear on a cheek, the hand trembling as it hovers over a palette, the long pause before an email is sent. These gestures, small yet profound, reveal the human cost of living under relentless scrutiny. Legacy begins to take on a new meaning. It is no longer defined by viral launches, sold-out collections, or social media clout. Instead, it is measured in honesty, resilience, and the courage to reveal vulnerability in a world that rarely forgives. Every decision to reconcile with past friends, every attempt to make amends, becomes an act of reclamation, not of fame, but of self. Nights are spent in quiet reflection, wandering through empty studios, staring at walls that once reverberated with applause and recognition. The glitter remains, but it no longer dominates the frame. It is tempered by understanding, a reminder that brilliance and fragility coexist in equal measure. Yet, even in this rebirth, tension lingers. The world may embrace transformation, or it may cling to memory, the glittered controversies that once defined him. Jeffree's gaze lingers on the mirror, searching not for perfection but for a measure of authenticity, a quiet acknowledgement that he can exist beyond spectacle. Friends and former rivals are revisited, fractured relationships slowly mended, conversations reopened with vulnerability as both shield and bridge. And still, a question persists, haunting both subject and audience alike. Can a life built on spectacle ever truly find peace, or will the past forever echo louder than redemption? The chapter closes in silence. The camera captures the faint flicker of neon reflected in his eyes, the slow exhale of someone navigating the aftermath of glory and collapse, the delicate act of living with history, yet unshackled. The screen fades to black, leaving only the unresolved tension of a man poised between the glittered persona and the fragile, complicated truth within, an ending that is both conclusion and beginning, a meditation on resilience, legacy, and the shadows that accompany brilliance.